Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're going to be exploring Kamala Markandaya's Nectar in a Sieve. And we're really going to be focusing on the characters, using the novel itself as our main source. We really want to get to know these people, understand what makes them tick, because through their individual stories, we can get a better grasp of what life was like in a rural Indian village undergoing some pretty massive changes. It's like looking through a window into a whole different world, but a world that in a lot of ways reflects our own.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think by zeroing in on these main characters, like what motivates them, their relationships, how they each deal with the hand they're dealt, we can gain a deeper understanding of the bigger picture. Things like, well, resilience, of course, the
Hmm.
push and pull between old traditions and new ways of life,
Hmm.
and, the power of family, especially when everything around them is in flux. Markandaya does such a great job of weaving these personal narratives together to paint a picture of a society in transition.
So let's jump right in, okay? And I think the best place to start is with Rukmani. She's our narrator, so everything we see and experience is filtered through her perspective. What would you say is one of the most striking things about her character?
For me, it's her quiet strength, her resilience. We follow her from a young bride, newly married to Nathan, a match her mother wasn't exactly thrilled about, by the way, to a woman navigating motherhood and, well, life's inevitable hardships. She accepts her situation, even if there's a hint of maybe resignation there. And that acceptance kind of sets the stage for how she tackles everything that comes after. Her resilience isn't just about enduring, it's about actively engaging with those difficulties, often by focusing on her family and her own rich inner world.
Right, and her role as a mother is so central to her story. We see her hopes and anxieties for her children, her eldest sons, Shanta, Padmini, and Thangam. Their marriages happened before the story begins, but it still highlights how important dowry and finding the right match was in their society. Then there's Ira, her daughter. Her birth is a moment of such joy, but of course we know that she faces some really tough challenges down the road. And then we have the younger sons, Murugan, Raja, and Selvam, and finally Kuti, the son they adopt. Motherhood really shapes Rukmani's entire existence, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And through her narration, we really get a sense of the depth and complexity of that experience. The joy she feels when Ira's born, it's so genuine. But it's also mixed with, like, an awareness of the societal pressures that Ira will have to face as a woman. The excerpts hint at Ira's difficult marriage or coming back home. It's clear that these events weigh heavily on Rukmani's mind and her hopes for her sons, even as they grapple with a changing world with all its opportunities and pitfalls. It's a universal feeling, right? The anxieties of parents who just want better for their children, even when the future is uncertain.
And we're given these incredibly intimate glimpses into Rukmani's thoughts, her reflections on her wedding night, her worries about what's to come, her sharp observations about village life. It's all so personal, so immediate. And then there's her yearning for education. Her father taught her to read and write, and she passes that knowledge on to her children. It speaks volumes about her, I think, her desire for something more than what's traditionally expected of her. It's almost like a quiet act of rebellion in its own way.
You can definitely see it that way. I mean, in a society where literacy wasn't necessarily the norm, Rukmani wanting to learn, it suggests a kind of intellectual hunger, recognizing the power of knowledge. And it's interesting how her personal desire for education ties into the broader societal changes that are happening. These new ideas, these different ways of looking at the world, they're starting to take hold. And Rukmani, her ability to read and write, it doesn't just influence her own personal growth, but also how she sees and interacts with the world around her, even her relationship with Nathan. It's like a microcosm of how individual actions, even small ones, can be connected to larger shifts in society.
Yeah, that's such a good observation. And speaking of Nathan, he's often depicted as this quiet, grounding force in Rukmani's life. He's a pennant farmer, so deeply connected to the land. How would you say Rukmani's narration reveals his character?
Well, through Rukmani's eyes, Nathan comes across as a man of few words but immense inner strength. He's resilient, just like the land he works. Their journey to their new home after they're married, it really highlights how simple their life is. They don't have much in the way of material possessions. But his connection to the land, it gives him a different kind of wealth, a different kind of richness. The way he approaches farming, his persistence in the face of natural disasters, and later the impact of the tannery, it all points to a deep and abiding connection to a way of life that's deeply rooted in tradition. He's almost one with the earth, you know.
And as a father, we see other sides to him, right? There's this sense of acceptance, maybe even a bit of sadness when it comes to Ira's situation. And the excerpts also show him interacting with his sons, especially when they start working at the tannery. It's like he carries both hope for their future and a deep understanding of what they might be losing in the process.
Exactly. And while we don't get to hear Nathan's thoughts directly, because he's not the narrator, his character is revealed through his actions and through Rukmani's perceptive observations. For example, when the snake incident happens, he comforts his family. It shows a tenderness that lies beneath his reserved exterior. And then later, his interactions with his sons at the tannery, they underscore the complicated feelings of a father watching his sons embrace a new, potentially uncertain future, a future that's so different from his own. And it's interesting to see how the story touches upon this unspoken tension, between Nathan's deep connection to the land and his son's move toward industrial labor. It's a kind of microcosm of those larger societal shifts we talked about earlier.
And their marriage, Rukmani and Nathan's relationship, it's really the emotional heart of the novel, wouldn't you say? They start out in this arranged marriage, but through all the things they go through together, through mutual support, a genuine love and respect develops between them.
Absolutely. There are these subtle but really significant moments that show that growing bond between them. The hardships they face together, raising their children, the quiet ways they support each other through tough times. All of it contributes to a connection that goes beyond that initial arrangement. Their relationship is a testament to how love can bloom even amidst adversity. It's not built on romantic ideals, but on shared experiences, a foundation of lived life together. Okay, so we've talked about Rukmani and Nathan, but let's shift gears a bit and look at some of the other important characters in their village, the people who impact Rukmani's life in different ways. And Old Granny is definitely a figure who stands out.
She's a fascinating character, isn't she? She's the village moneylender. And even her small interactions with Rukmani, like when she buys vegetables from her, they give you a glimpse into how well she understands the economic realities of village life. She's an observer, and her comments, even when they're blunt or a little harsh, they probably reflect a deep, pragmatic understanding of how things work. She represents a certain aspect of the village's traditional power structure.
Then there's Kali, Rukmani's neighbor and friend. She's got a strong personality, maybe a little bit of a gossip, always curious about what's going on, like when she questions Rukmani about Nathan's hut.
Kali's a vital link for Rukmani, connecting her to the social fabric of the village. Her strong personality and her tendency to, well, gossip, they give us a peek into the community dynamics, the informal networks of information. And she's there for some of the important events in Rukmani's life, like when they're preparing for Ira's wedding and after the storm hits. She's the supportive neighbor, even if she's a bit nosy sometimes. And her personality, it's a good contrast to Rukmani's more reserved nature. It shows the diversity of personalities within the village.
Right, and then we have Kunthi. She's another woman in the village, and she's described as physically striking. It suggests maybe a different social standing, a different set of expectations placed on her. And the excerpts hint at a more complex dynamic between her, Rukmani, and Nathan.
There's a kind of air of mystery about Kunthi. The fact that she's described as physically striking and the suggestion that her social standing is different, it hints at potential tensions, maybe different experiences within the community. And the way she interacts with Rukmani and Nathan, it's complex. It makes you think about the unspoken social rules and potential conflicts that exist beneath the surface of village life. Her character adds an element of intrigue. It suggests that not all relationships within the community are simple or straightforward.
We also meet Janaki, often mentioned with Kali. They add to our sense of the village's social landscape, that feeling of community.
Yet Janaki and Kali, they're often seen together. And while Janaki might not be in the spotlight as much in the excerpts, her presence emphasizes how interconnected the women are in the village. They share experiences, they have these informal support systems. It's the collective nature of village life.
And then there's Kenny, the doctor from outside the village. He has a huge impact on Rukmani's life, especially when it comes to education and medical help.
Kenny represents change coming from outside the village. His decision to teach Rukmani to read and write, it's a turning point for her. It helps her grow and adapt to a changing world. And the medical aid he provides, it introduces new knowledge and practices into this traditional setting. It highlights both the positive potential and the friction that can arise when different worldviews clash. His presence forces the villagers to consider different perspectives.
We've already talked about Ira, Rukmani's daughter, but it's worth revisiting her story. The joy surrounding her birth stands in such stark contrast to the challenges she faces later. The excerpts mention her marriage and her eventual return home, hinting at the immense societal pressures she has to deal with.
Aura's story is really heartbreaking because it shows how restrictive societal expectations can be for women, especially when it comes to things like marriage, having children, and social status. She becomes a focal point for exploring themes of social stigma, limited choices, and the crushing weight of societal judgment. Her coming back home, it could be seen as a challenge to traditional norms, and it raises questions about her future and whether she'll be accepted by the community. Her experiences resonate with the struggles many women face in different societies, even today.
Then we have Rukmani's sons, Murugan, Raja, and Selvam. The excerpts focus on their involvement with the tannery. That shift in their livelihood, it feels like a major turning point, not just for the family, but for the whole village. And then there are Arjun and Thambi, also working at the tannery, emphasizing this huge economic and social transition. And let's not forget Kunthi, the adopted son. His arrival later in Rukmani's life must add a whole new layer of complexity to the family dynamic.
The son's going to work at the tannery. It symbolizes how industrialization is encroaching on their traditional way of life, which was centered around farming. And that change, it has big consequences, not just for their economic well-being, but for the social structures and values of the village. The tannery represents progress, but it also represents potential displacement, the loss of skills passed down through generations, the lure and the dangers of a new economic order. And Kuthi's adoption later on, it shows how much compassion Rukmani has, her capacity to nurture, even when things are hard. It adds another dimension to the themes of family and belonging.
And toward the end of the excerpts, we meet Puli. He's a young boy who comes into Rukmani's life, and he seems to embody a different kind of resilience, maybe a raw instinct to survive, especially when facing extreme hardship.
Yeah, Puli's arrival later in the story, it signifies how Rukmani's journey through hardship continues. And his resilience, his ability to face difficult situations head-on, it mirrors her own strength, maybe even amplified because he's young and facing a different set of struggles. He might represent a new connection for Rukmani, and he's a testament to that human drive to survive and find meaning even in the darkest of times. Maybe he even offers a glimmer of hope, a new perspective on life's enduring cycles.
It's amazing how Markandaya uses such specific details throughout the excerpts, little anecdotes, snippets of dialogue, to bring these characters to life. Like Rukmani describing her first impression of Nathan, Kali's blunt questions, Nathan's moments of quiet wisdom. These moments make them feel so real.
Oh, absolutely. Those details, those interactions, they're essential. They help us go beyond just knowing the characters' roles in the story. We start to understand their personalities, their motivations, the complexities of their relationships. They make the story authentic, and they create a deeper connection with the reader. They remind us that even when we're talking about huge societal changes, it's those individual human experiences that really stick with us.
And it's so clear how interconnected these characters are. Their stories aren't isolated incidents. They're threads woven together to create this rich tapestry of a community in the midst of transformation. It shows how differently people adapt, or maybe even struggle to adapt to those changes.
That's exactly right. Each character's journey, the choices they make, how they interact with one another, it all adds up to a bigger story about change and adaptation. And by understanding their individual experiences, we get a much more complete picture of how people as a whole respond to things like progress, loss, and that human need for connection in the face of adversity.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Nectar in a Sieve, we see a community full of life and complexity, grappling with monumental change. We have Rukmani, our resilient narrator, Nathan, her steady anchor, and all the other characters who make up their world. Their stories offer a powerful way to look at how people experience change, the enduring strength of family, and the remarkable spirit that endures even in the face of immense hardship.
And what's especially interesting is how those individual stories reflect those larger societal shifts. The transition from an agrarian way of life to industrialization, how women's roles and expectations are changing, the impact of outside forces on traditional communities. And amidst all of that, the novel also highlights the power of the human spirit, the ability to love and connect, and the resilience that allows people and communities to persevere. It really makes you think. How do these personal stories from a specific time and place resonate with the changes and transformations you've seen or learned about in your own world?
That is a thought-provoking question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Nectar in a Sieve. We'll see you next time for another exploration.